Sales has always been a passion of mine, as you as well. I started kind of when I was little. I think it's always been innate in me. I was like the top Girl Scout leader. So excited for every year to come around when I can sell. And that kind of bled into my love for sales and just kind of evolving. I've really loved selling in tech, and I feel like that can span wider, than just having a product.
Right.
But I think we can talk about the different products that I've sold, but it's led me to tech and just being passionate about that, and just now just curating content on LinkedIn. And I'm glad that you've been able to see it. That kind of draws people back to who a salesperson is and how we can be transformative in an art or in a science, and how different people view sales. That's kind of where my mindset is around sales so far.
Yeah, like similar to you, my journey started when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
With my parents, our finances was sometimes up, sometimes down. So during the summers, when, we need a little extra money, what I would do, I'm like, okay, how could I make extra money? Like during this, if it was snowing, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go shoveling and make some money. If it's summer, I'm like, we used to sell like frozen lemonade. We used to call them juleps here in Rochester. I would do stuff like that. But then as I got older, like when I turned 20, my first sales gig was life insurance. And then it's been, a variety of different industries since then. So that's been my journey. Now, do
Yeah.
you think, so we both started when we were young. Do you think
Yeah.
salespeople are born or made? I know that's a popular question. And we
Um,
both started when we were young. So
I would say born with it. Just people can be made and people can be given a set of like processes and systems and like, hey, do this, but you're either born with it, like you either love it or you don't. So that's where it comes from. You either like want to wake up and want to sell and talk to people every day, or you don't. You just want to do a job and get money, if that makes sense. So it's either,
yeah,
it's like,
I guess we just disagree a lot today. I feel like,
I know our opinions are
I
going to
feel
be
like,
clashing.
honestly, I think it's 60-40. I think
Okay.
60% are born, but I think there's 40% that are made. I feel like, I don't know, somebody may have went to school to be a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe for some reason they lose their teacher position.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, they become a financial advisor, right?
Right.
But they only became a financial advisor because they were put in a position where they're like, you know what? I want my own freedom. So I feel like sometimes people have to go through something,
Mm-hmm.
and then whatever they went through led them to sales, and then they end up loving sales after that situation. So that's my take. I don't know how you feel about that.
So many sales leaders, especially like thought leaders nowadays, I see on LinkedIn and just like sales training. So many of them say like, "Oh, I didn't think that I was going to be in sales. Like I ended up in sales." So I definitely think that, through different doors you go through and different opportunities, you realize that, wow, I do have these capabilities, and like, oh, I'm led into sales. So that can definitely happen. Like no one just wakes up and is born and is like, oh, I do want to be in sales. Like not many people are like that. I'm like that. I'm like a rare breed, probably like less than 1%. So in that sense, I feel like it can be learned. It can be learned that it's a passion of yours. However, the innate abilities to just be comfortable with talking to people and having that extrovert kind of sense to them, I feel like that is you're born with.
Yeah, because I'm definitely an extrovert. I
Yeah.
definitely, I think with the whole what is it, the Myers-Briggs joint, I'm an ENFJ.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of salespeople are probably extroverted, but I do have a friend. She's a financial advisor, but she's extremely introverted.
Yeah.
But she's a salesperson. Um, my financial advisor, her name is Sierra. She is introverted.
Mhm.
So I have met people who are great at sales who are introvert.
Mhm.
Um, and typically when you think of an introvert, you're like, oh, introvert is the accountant, right? Or the introvert is maybe the software engineer or something.
Yeah.
But there are a few introverted salespeople out there. And beforehand, I used to have more of your opinion, but I've learned there's percentages. But I definitely think probably 70% of salespeople are probably extroverted.
Yeah, I mean, I have more to learn, obviously. I'm still, I'm only just starting off in my first role as an SDR. So there's still so much to learn. And I think that's just like from my point of view, from my experience so far. But yeah, I'm excited to learn even more, from the community and from other people who have different opinions. I think we have a lot of different opinions today. So that'll probably be
uncovered. But that's where growth happens, when
I'm open to growth.
100%. Like I'm gonna grow and learn from you.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't know, I just found it fascinating when you made that post about sales is it an art or science. I'm like, I never really thought about that.
Yeah. It's such a
how did you stumble upon that? Was it like, you read a Forbes article and you're like, oh, I'm gonna share the joint? Or was it more like, okay, this is something I'm curious about?
It's funny. It's just my own like curated thoughts. And usually the content I produce is from conversations with people who like evoke thoughts in me. I'm like, oh, that's like a good post. Or like, oh, I'm curious to see how other people would react to it because I have this point of view. Like I know other people have different point of views. So it's kind of, I'm posting around learning, but specifically around the conversation between art versus science. My manager was like, you like to think outside of the box. Like you like to think of sales and art. And I was like, I do? Like I didn't even realize that. I was like, okay, I guess I do. And I know so many people are more data driven and think of it as a science. So I'm like, okay, how can I blend the two? Because you can't be a good salesperson without having both of them.
Correct.
Either in art, you see it as art, you're creative, you're all over the place, have no structure, or you're just on the science side. It's more data driven, system based, but then you have no sense of like maybe, trying different things and being really, transformative, outgoing, maybe you're more that way. So yeah, there's definitely a mix between the two. So I wanted to post it and just kind of learn what people thought. And I knew everyone was going to pick both. I did a poll, so everyone didn't see it. I did a poll and it was just art, science, and then both. And mostly like probably 85 to 90% picked both. So my hypothesis was correct.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm curious, and I'm just asking out of curiosity. So you said you were an out of the box thinker, creative. Okay. So what makes you that way? Right. So when I think of a lot of the creatives that I know, they draw, they're in the art, they're in the photography, they're in the crafts, they can like make things, they can build things. So is that like what is your creative and your like what makes you creative and out of the box?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think as well. I think it goes back to like learning as a kid, like different subjects that I've liked. I always like art. I'm not very good at drawing, but I like having my own ideas and putting that into something. Like it's very visual learning, and it's very like it's in front of me, like it's material, science, and it's a lot of theory and it's maybe boring to me. So that's kind of maybe where I stand and just like learning. You could probably tell throughout my career and, being in school, that's kind of where it brought me to. And then, yeah, I just feel inspired by sales too. So, and that creativity and how you can, come up with your own thoughts and kind of wordsmith it to get someone to be desirable about your product. Like, I just think that's so cool. So that's kind of my love for it. And that's why I think whoever has kind of my thinking, that love for it, is best suited for sales. But maybe your mindset, I'd love to hear your mindset around science-based and how you've grown up, and then how you think, you're really good at sales. Because that's how I think I'm good at sales. If that makes sense.
Okay, so all right, so I'm gonna be vulnerable real quick. So
okay, go ahead.
when I was born, the doctors told my mom that I would have like a learning disability type thing, right?
Okay.
So when I was 2 years old, my very first memory that I remember is when I was 2, and she taught me like how to add and subtract or some type of math. I don't know what it was. So for me, numbers like I could, like, let's say we listen to a presentation, right? I'll remember the numbers
Yeah.
more, the number and statistics. That's why when you hear me talk, you may hear me say percentages and this and that and formulas and stuff like that. But it's because I think like I grew up feeling numbers were important.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sales, that's why I like numbers, data, analytics, the science, the tactical, you know what I mean? That's why like my mind works that way. It's not that I'm not creative, but if I was to boil it down, I'm probably like 65% more structured because I feel like that's just the way things should operate. And so when it comes to sales, I'm like, okay, I create these goals and metrics and okay, KPI, all of those things matter to me. And I'm like, okay, these things and numbers matter to me because it's like, this is what I can trust. This is what I can go by. You know what I mean? So when it comes to sales being an art or science, I'm probably more science just because of just the way I grew up and just the way my mind works. Like my mind works in numbers and formula.
Yeah, and I think you said it, like it's, it's around like what you trust and what you feel comfortable with. Like to me, I remember, I think I have a little ADHD. If we're being vulnerable, like I do. So, I would get taken out of class and they would have me read this paragraph and they would ask me to like regurgitate it and be like, what did you remember? And there's numbers in it, there's stories. And I would always remember kind of the whole story of it. Like I would never remember the numbers. And kind of how that relates to sales. It's like, I was an AE and I was selling a CRM, and it was a very transactional sale, like on the phone, I'm trying to do a subscription. And whenever they would give me the numbers back or their name or anything, I would forget. I'd be like, what did you say? Like I would forget, So I always remembered like big picture or ideas or stories. So it's kind of similar how we learn. So it definitely goes back to who we are, how we grew up, just, how we connect with other people and what we remember. But I also think that it's really important to our listening skills in sales, like what we listen, what we, I feel like there's probably more science term, but what we digest and process, and then kind of come back out with, like that means a lot too. What do you think?
Yeah, and to add to what you're saying too, is like, okay, if sales is an art or a science, or it's both, I think what's important is that empathy and compassion is involved, right? So I've seen where if, let's just say a company, whether the company leadership, they're all about the numbers, right? And it's all about process and it's all about science, but there's no empathy and compassion. The numbers don't tell the whole story. I think I may have made a post in the past, like, a salesperson, let's say a salesperson went through a breakup or something like that. Like him or her broke up with their girlfriend, whoever it was, and their numbers drop. But obviously in the professional setting, usually don't talk about that kind of stuff, but maybe they're a little distracted, right? Numbers don't always tell the whole story, or it could just be, sometimes you just have a bad month in sales. Like we all know that's how it is, but somebody may look at somebody's numbers and like, oh, these last 2 months, they haven't done so well, So I think no matter if it's a sale, if sales is an art or a science, I think what's important is that empathy and compassion is included in that, because when you're training someone, their style might be totally different. Like imagine if you were training me and you're like, you need to be more out of the box, but I'm like, numbers matter to me. And it's like, that's where that empathy and compassion come too. So I think that element is like important.
Yeah, that is super important. And actually you bring up a good point, because I think training these different types of people is really important. So I was even talking to my manager after I posted this, and he was like, oh, you commented on, because remember I said that he had a conversation with me around kind of what I am, art or science. He was like, oh, I see you posted about it. And I was like, yeah, I think different personalities can do different activities and we should be trained differently. I almost think there should be a test right when we first get a job. You know, if you're an SDR in sales, you should get a test right away and then see kind of where you stand and how you should be treated. But yeah, I think empathy and compassion is huge in sales, and especially with kind of going on that side, it's like, you know, you're going through different things. Everyone has their own life, and that plays a role into your job as well. So that's a good point as well.
Yeah, you know, I was talking with, her name is Natalie Burge. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing her last name wrong. But on LinkedIn, and her and I were talking, and we were talking about what you just mentioned about the whole assessment thing.
Yeah.
I feel like people should get the assessment when they're in the 9th grade. I think it should start there. And then they should get it, they should take it again in their senior year of high school. And then maybe 4 years after that. I feel like from 9th grade, 12th grade, and then like maybe after you graduate college, if you go to college, and then if you get a job, that should just be part of the process. Because it's like, if whether I'm extroverted or introverted, whether I'm creative or process data driven, those things matter. And you won't know unless you do that assessment, because it's like, and that assessment will give you so much like data information, whether for me as an individual and for the employer or the person training the leadership. It's like, it's only going to benefit both people, because it's like, even though I'm data driven, I want to be more creative. So I will come to you like, yo, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. What suggestions do you have? And you might come up with a solution that I would never have thought about. You know?
No, that's a really great point. I think that's a good idea to have different assessments at different points, because there's a lot of growth between those times. And then also coming from a recruiter standpoint, when now you're graduating college, they're looking for different types of people. You know, they want diversity on their teams. They want people who are data driven and also creative, who will bring up the group motivation, you know, aspirational type people, me. So I contribute a lot to my team, who there's a couple people like you who are super system based, you know, data driven, science based, and I help them and they help me. So it's a push and pull kind of situation. But yeah, I think that's really funny, because I'm seeing, you know, people post on LinkedIn, oh, I'm looking for this type of person, like a creative person in a role. So I also think the structure of an organization and their training can tailor to different people, and they could be looking for different people too. So having an assessment of who you are from all those different years is really impactful to your resume and could be a benefit on your resume, and it could help you out.
Yeah. And here's a question for you. So
Sure.
What would be your advice or your perspective on, okay, it's clear you're more creative, I'm more data driven, right? What could make a good, successful working relationship, right? Like, obviously, I wouldn't judge you. You wouldn't judge me, right? But how could two people who have two different working styles have a successful working relationship, even though one's creative and one's more data driven?
Well, I would relate it back to our current climate in politics with like Democrat and Republican. Like, how do you connect with them? And kind of going back, it's empathy and it's compassion. It's understanding them. It's, you know, approaching them with all those things. Yeah, I would suggest to try to understand that person as best as possible, and not judge them and attack them for their thoughts or beliefs or how they've been raised. The similarities to the Democrat and Republic, it's so prevalent, because, you know, how do you treat anyone who's different from you? You approach it with kindness, and you share your side, you share your ideas, and then you give them the space and listen to them and be patient for their side, So in a working relationship, obviously it's more professional, but yeah, I would say just with kindness, and just being a human. Yeah, there's no like
Yeah.
secret sauce there.
Yeah. That's so important. Kindness, like trying to
Kindness.
understand. I definitely agree with that. Just because
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, I've worked with all kinds of people.
Mhm.
I've worked with people who are more similar to me, and I
Mhm.
work with people who are different from me. And in either case, good communication was what made the working relationship the best. I think of like when I worked at a startup, Stephanie Armstrong, she was the CEO, president at the time. And she just was her and I were similar. We have very similar working styles.
Mhm.
But it was her empathy and her good communication. Like, even though she was the CEO, she made time for me. We would talk once a week. I think she even spent like 10 minutes asking me about my personal life on top, and then like the rest of the meeting was about business.
Mhm.
But that went far. That went far, I would say. And then I used to have a manager named Kathy Bills. She was like the regional manager or something like that. And even though she was high up, when she came around, she would make sure she asked me, "How you doing? How's your family? Like, is there anything I could do to help?" Um, on the flip side, both of them, if they were stressed
Mhm.
or they weren't in a mind frame, I remember Kathy one time, she was stressed and she's like, "Listen, today is not the day."
Mhm.
Like, meaning she just was not in the mood for no nonsense. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I know I need to step up because she, today is, she kind of stressed out. So I appreciated the honesty and the vulnerability versus like trying to hide that you're okay when you're not okay.
Mhm.
So I just feel like good communication is important
Definitely.
with the team.
Mhm. With working with similar people too, and then also different people, do you find that your results or your objectives or even like working on the project is better or worse with the different people?
That's a very good question. I would say, honestly, I would rather be paired with someone that's different from me
Okay.
because it challenges me more.
Mhm.
And when I come across a customer or a client that's different, or I have a client that's different, I'm we're able to, I don't use the word tackle, but we're able to come up with a more cohesive, broader perspective.
Yeah.
I think there's a terminology called DBT,
Mhm.
where basically it's like understanding to have a complete, because none of, like, all of us have our own opinions, all
Yep.
of us have our own perspective. But so let's just say I say the best color in the world is blue, right? The opposing view would maybe be the best color in the world is red, right?
Mhm.
So understanding both sides gives you more of a complete perspective. You see what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yes.
Um, so if I'm working with someone who's similar to me, I may become, I don't want to use the word bias, but I may just, oh, we think the same, you know what I mean? And that may be that may be more easy. That
Mhm.
may be less difficult. It may feel more fun because you don't disagree as much. But then you might come across a situation, and because y'all think the same, y'all miss this piece.
Mhm.
So if I'm thinking of growth and I'm thinking long term, I'd rather be paired with creative because I'm more data driven. I don't know how you feel.
I completely agree. I think it's a balance of yin and yang, you know? I don't know if you're my yin or yang or whatever, but you can decide. But yeah, if I were to be matched with someone, I would want it to be someone who picks up the slack where I have weakness or I lack, you know? Um, I like to take charge on certain tasks and then they can take charge on other ones. And if I was on a sales call with someone, I would much rather it be someone who compliments me or I compliment them instead of like fighting for the attention almost, you know? And we have similar skills. So yeah, to your point, I think like it's easy to like people who are like you, like a like-minded um, sense. But yeah, regarding getting work done and just like being a complete unit of delivering the best experience or cohesion, like you said, for a project, I would want someone who's opposite to me.
Yeah. What kind of task do you feel you want to take the lead on? Like what kind of projects or things you like? Like what are you interested in?
Um, I mean, lots of things. I mean, I'm an SDR, so I think in that sense, there's outbound, there's inbound, there's prospecting, uh, there's different daily tasks that you can do, lots of metrics that you can set up for yourself. I'm more of it like how I contribute to my team. I'm more of a creative type person, outgoing. I'd rather like curate content than be going down a list of tasks that I have to do. So I come with ideas. I'm like the idea person. So I would say in that sense, like I do a lot of video prospecting. I do a lot of social selling. I like to call people. I like to talk to people. But where I lack is just more of the structure of day-to-day workflow. So I go to my other peers that are really, doing really well in that and who have found success and, sequences and like more stuff that's been tested and A/B testing and things like that in that nature. But I can't think of
Yeah.
like a specific project, but in my day-to-day.
Yeah, I see what you mean. No.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that because it's like, for me, like, so like there's this video,
Mm-hmm.
and the details are vague to me, but I do remember it talked about like there's three types of salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
It said there's the finder, there's something else, and then there's the closer. Finder, closer. So for me, I think like I'm more of a closer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do create content, and I have a process for that. But my biggest passion does come from like the day-to-day stuff and closing. So like, let's just say hypothetically, you and I working in the same company, whatever, and we're paired together. And somehow, some way, let's just say you create content, you prospect or whatever, you do qualified, and then I'm the person they talk to last. You're like, okay, they're interested. I talk to them, and somehow we're able to split the sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make bread, I make bread. You doing what you passionate about, I'm doing what I'm passionate about. Like, let's just say, like, okay, you had a phone call with John Smith, right? Whatever, somehow, some way, whether it's through social media, whatever. I would literally write all the details. She talked to him on this date, this time. This is the second conversation. We sent him an email, blah, 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 blah. And, it took 3 weeks from her first message was a LinkedIn message to this day closed deal. Mm-hmm. Then I have like statistics. I'm like 40% of the time it takes 3 weeks for us to close a deal. So then it's like,
yeah.
So that's why in my head I'm like as you were talking, I'm like, oh, okay. So her style is a little different from mine, yeah. But I could see where your skills and my skills would like align, even though we're different.
Yeah, it's funny, like I don't look high level over that and be like, oh, okay, so let me break that down around, the closing time and the percentage of if I do this activities, I get that result. I need someone like that. Like I need like a little like help me with those activities to A/B test, like I was saying, and to help me with that, because I think that's crucial in projecting or accelerating your career into knowing what you've done successful, and then obviously go to the next role and have evidence. But yeah, that's a big part of sales.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been such a pleasure
Thank you.
If people wanted to connect with you, how would they find you?
Sure. And I'm realizing I didn't like say my full name and where I'm working too. So my name is Lilah Nielsen, and I'm an enterprise SDR at Telium, which is a customer data orchestration platform. And you can find me on LinkedIn because that's where I do my most awesome work. I love curating content and connecting with people, and obviously social selling. So I'm on there a lot. So it's just Lilah Nielsen. Yeah.
Awesome. And do you guys have a YouTube channel, podcast, or anything that you wanted to shout out?
I think I'm going to create a podcast soon. So that's a TBH.
A
So
if you do,
yeah,
we'll like create an announcement or something like that. So definitely keep me
awesome.
posted.
Sure.
And we'll share it.
Yeah, that's secret
That'd be awesome.
content. So I guess the cat's out of the bag now. So